I was in my Lyft on the way to work with an older black gentleman, and I was explaining to him how I miss my wardrobe. You know, I haven't had a chance to get clean and step out and do anything because all I do is work. I don't have a car, and I'm not familiar with my area, right? He said, and this is the realest ever, he said that we killing ourselves to make a living that we forget to live. I'm gonna say that again. We killing ourselves to make a living that we forget to live. Let that sink in.
A mother's compassion became her death sentence. June 15, 2024, Berkeley, Missouri. Police officers approach a house on Redford Drive for a routine welfare check. Inside, they discover a scene that will haunt them forever, a double homicide that defies comprehension. The victims, 53-year-old Mioshi McCloud and her 11-year-old granddaughter, Mielle Harris. The suspect, Mioshi's own son, found at the scene with blood on his hands. Just days earlier, Mioshi had opened her home to her adult son after moving from Seattle to St. Louis for a fresh start, a decision made from love that would lead to unimaginable consequences. The most chilling aspect of this case isn't just the brutality of the crime, it's what happened before. 1 week prior, Mioshi walked into the Berkeley Police Department, located just behind her home, and reported something that should have triggered immediate action. No one listened. What followed was a sequence of events that raises disturbing questions about family violence, system failures, and the price of ignoring warning signs. How could a mother's kindness result in such betrayal? What pushed a son to commit such an unthinkable act? And why didn't anyone intervene when they had the chance? The final moments of this tragedy played out through a series of desperate phone calls, communications that reveal both the horror of what was happening and the calculated nature of what followed. By the time help arrived, 2 lives had been extinguished in the place that should have been their sanctuary. This double murder shocked the quiet community of Berkeley. Neighbors struggled to process how such violence could erupt so close to an elementary school and police station. Friends and family were left wondering what signs they missed, what they could have done differently. Tonight, we'll examine the days leading up to this tragedy. We'll trace the path that led a family toward destruction and uncover the critical moments where intervention might have changed everything. This isn't just another murder case. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't strangers lurking in shadows. They're the familiar faces across the dinner table. Have you ever had that gut feeling about someone close to you that something wasn't right? That instinct that makes you uneasy around someone you should trust? What did you do about it? Welcome to Shadows of Crime. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. This case will show you why recognizing the warning signs of violence could save a life, perhaps even your own. 2024 began with Mioshi McCloud packing up her Seattle life. At 53, she wasn't just starting over for herself. She was creating a new beginning for her 11-year-old granddaughter, Mielle Harris. Boxes filled with memories, hopes, packed alongside winter clothes. The destination, St. Louis, Missouri. The reason, family. Music had always been Mioshi's sanctuary. Her powerful voice had graced local venues throughout Seattle, where she'd built a reputation as a soulful performer whose renditions of gospel and R&B classics moved audiences to tears.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone, yes. And I can see all obstacles in my way, hey, hey. All of the darker clouds are passing now. Yeah, it's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Yeah, it's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
Friends described her singing as transcendent, a talent that brought light to those around her. Though she never pursued fame beyond local recognition, her voice was the kind that made strangers stop and listen, that turned ordinary moments into something sacred. In St. Louis, she had hoped to connect with new venues, to share her gift with a different audience. She was all about family, her niece would later tell reporters, the capitalization in her statement revealing the emphasis Mioshi placed on these connections. This devotion to family bonds drove her cross-country journey, pulling up roots from the Pacific Northwest to plant them in the Midwest. The move represented optimism, closer to relatives, new opportunities, a chance to strengthen connections that distance had strained. Mile transferred to Berkeley Elementary, walking distance from their new home. The young girl, bright and sociable, quickly adapted to her new school environment. Miyoshi's sister, Shwanda Taylor, described her as someone who was all smiles, even when things got hard. This resilience defined her, a woman who faced challenges with unwavering positivity. She was very talented and very loved, Taylor added, painting a picture of a woman whose presence brightened rooms and whose absence would leave an unfillable void. The house on Redford Drive seemed perfect. A modest single-story home in a quiet neighborhood. From their front yard, Mioshi and Mael could see the Berkeley Police Department building. This proximity should have represented safety, protection. Instead, it would become a cruel irony. In late spring 2024, Mioshi made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her life and end it prematurely. Her 28-year-old son, Laurent Aucain, needed a place to stay. Despite their complicated history, details of which remain private, Mioshi opened her door. The mother who loved hard, according to family, couldn't turn away her own child. Aucain moved into the Redford Drive home, creating a household of 3 generations, grandmother, granddaughter, and the son who connected them. Photos from this brief period show normal family moments. Meals shared, conversations had, a semblance of harmony that masked growing tensions. The physical layout of the house became significant in retrospect. The living room where Mioshi would later be found. The bedroom where Mioshi would take her last breath. The kitchen where meals were prepared and perhaps arguments erupted. The front door that Aucain entered as a family member and would later exit as a murderer. What conversations happened within those walls? What moments of tension preceded the violence? What did Mioshi see in her son that prompted her to walk to the police station just days after welcoming him home? The Berkeley Police Department stood less than 500 feet from Miyoshi's front door. Officers arrived for work, completed paperwork, and went about their duties, unaware that a woman living in their shadow had come to them for help, and that their response would prove fatally inadequate. Miyoshi's decision to welcome her son home came from the same place as her move to St. Louis, a deep commitment to family. She couldn't have known this act of maternal love would be her final sacrifice. June 8, 2024, 1 week before the murders. Mioshi McCloud walks into the Berkeley Police Department alone. Security footage captures her determined stride through the front doors. Her face shows concern, not yet terror. Inside, she files a report that should have triggered immediate action. The official document, later obtained by investigators, contains her clear statement. Her son, Laurent Aucain, was making explicit threats against her and her 11-year-old granddaughter. He said he would hurt us. The report reads, "I don't feel safe in my own home." The desk officer takes her information, files the paperwork. Mioshi returns to her house, just visible through the station's back windows, where her son continues to live, under the same roof as his threatened targets. No officers visit the home that day, no follow-up calls are made, no protective measures are implemented. The report sits in the system, one among many, as the clock ticks toward tragedy. Between June 8th and June 15th, neighbors later recall hearing arguments from the house on Redford Drive. Raised voices after midnight. A door slammed so hard it shook nearby windows. A child, presumably Mael, crying on the front porch one afternoon. Inside the home, tension builds like a pressure cooker. Mioshi begins sleeping with her bedroom door locked, according to text messages she sent to her sister. Mio spends more time at school activities, arriving early and leaving late. Perhaps a child's intuitive attempt to avoid a threatening environment. Aucain's behavior grows increasingly erratic. He paces the house at night, makes strange comments to neighbors, stares at his mother and niece during meals with an expression that a visiting family friend would later describe as cold, like he was looking through them, not at them. 7 days pass since Miyoshi's report. 7 days during which intervention could have occurred. 7 days during which 2 lives might have been saved. The Berkeley Police Department, visible from the McCloud home, continues its daily operations. Officers come and go, unaware that a woman and child in their direct line of sight are living their final days. The warning signs were there, written in an official police report, spoken aloud by a concerned mother, visible to anyone paying attention. But no one was. Do you think police departments need better protocols for handling family threat reports? Have you ever reported a threat that wasn't taken seriously? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insight might help others recognize when to push harder for protection. As June 15th dawns, Mioshi and Miel have no way of knowing they have less than 24 hours to live. Violence shattered the quiet of Berkeley, Missouri on Saturday, June 15, 2024. What began as an unremarkable summer day ended with 2 lives extinguished and a community forever changed. At approximately 5 p.m., Berkeley police officers responded to a welfare check at a home on the 8300 block of Redford Drive. The call that prompted their response would later prove to be the desperate, final attempt to save 2 lives. Earlier that day, Miel Harris, just 11 years old, had made a frantic call to her mother. In those brief, terrifying moments, she managed to tell her mother she had been stabbed. This call, a child's plea for help, set in motion the events that would reveal the tragedy. After receiving this alarming call, Miel's mother attempted to contact Mioshi McCloud, her own mother and Miel's grandmother. When the phone was answered, it wasn't Miyoshi's voice on the line, but that of Laurente O'Kane, her son, Miel's uncle. The brief exchange was chilling. O'Kane, breathing heavily, told Miel's mother that her daughter was asleep. When asked to speak with Mioshi, he claimed she couldn't come to the phone. Something in his voice, his breathing, his words triggered immediate alarm. O'Kane offered no resistance as officers secured his blood-covered hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut, a sound that echoed through the kitchen, still bearing signs of a normal day, interrupted. A half-prepared meal on the counter, chairs knocked askew during the violence, a child's homework on the table. As O'Kane was led to the patrol car, neighbors watched in stunned silence. The man they had seen coming and going from the house now walked between officers, his clothes stained dark red, his expression vacant. One witness described him as completely detached, like he was sleepwalking. Inside the house, evidence technicians worked methodically. Their cameras flashed as they documented blood spatter patterns that told the story of the attack. The initial assault, the victims' movements as they tried to escape, the final locations where they fell. Investigators collected the murder weapon, a kitchen knife found in the sink, partially cleaned but still bearing traces of blood in the handle's grooves. O'Kane's belongings yielded additional evidence. His phone, recovered from the scene, contained no calls for help, no signs of remorse or panic after the killings. Instead, investigators found he had searched online for "How long does it take someone to die from stab wounds?" in the hours between the murders and police arrival. On Sunday, June 16, the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office filed formal charges against Laurente O'Kane, 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of armed criminal action. The charging documents described the killings as deliberate, premeditated acts, language that carried the possibility of the most severe penalties under Missouri law. But the investigation wasn't complete. As detectives examined O'Kane's digital footprint, they discovered something that added another disturbing dimension to the case. Hidden on his Facebook account was an image classified as child sexual abuse material. This discovery led prosecutors to file an additional charge on June 20, possession of child pornography, a Class D felony in Missouri. O'Kane made his first court appearance on Monday, June 17. Security footage from the courtroom showed him entering in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. Reporters noted his flat affect, no visible emotion as the charges were read, no reaction to the family members who sobbed in the gallery. The judge ordered him held without bond at the St. Louis County Justice Center. A bond reduction hearing was scheduled for June 24, with a preliminary hearing set for July 17. Legal experts commenting on the case noted the strength of the evidence against O'Kane, his presence at the scene, the blood evidence, the confession to police, and the prior report of threats made by Mioshi. As legal proceedings began, the Berkeley community responded with an outpouring of grief.
We know from court documents that 11-year-old called her mother back in Seattle, telling her she had been stabbed. After calling police, that mother then called the home back, where police say the suspect picked up the phone and he was breathing heavy as he told the woman her daughter was asleep. It's a tragedy continuing to leave that Berkeley neighborhood shaken up.
From the looks of the paramedics and the guys that went in there and came out of there, it was something horrible.
Sharon Thomas watching from his front yard Saturday night as Berkeley police surrounded his neighborhood in crime scene tape. Officers were responding to a welfare check at this home around 4:45, finding a 53-year-old woman and an 11-year-old girl stabbed to death inside.
That's a kid. You can be evil, but a kid? You got to be real evil.
More than 2 days later, neighbors still haunted as blood stains the sidewalk. This man, Lorente O'Kane, has been charged in the murder of his mother, Mioshi McCloud, and his niece, Mael Harris.
They found the suspect standing in the front yard covered in blood.
Berkeley Police Major Steve Runge says officers responded to that house twice in the past, but it didn't raise any red flags at the time. First Alert 4 looked deeper into O'Kane's criminal history in Washington state, ranging from assault to second-degree robbery to felony firearm possession.
We found his arrest history in Seattle as a very violent past.
Inside the home, officers found large amounts of blood and 3 knives that were used. According to court documents, it was the niece's mother back in Seattle who called 911 after her daughter called her saying she'd been stabbed.
We sending our prayer up to the family.
Carla lived just a few houses down, saying the suspect, his mom, and his niece moved to the neighborhood a little over a year ago.
On our street, we welcome people in if we get to know you.
And that's exactly what she did. With her friend she nicknamed Mimi. Carla was devastated by the loss, remembering Mioshi McCloud as a sweet, hard-working woman.
We'll sit right there near her and just sit out here while it's cool and just talk. And she had a beautiful voice, y'all. Oh, my God.
A makeshift memorial appeared in front of the Redford Drive home. Stuffed animals, flowers, and handwritten notes, forming a growing tribute to the victims. Children from Berkeley Elementary, where Mael had been a student, left drawings and messages for their lost classmate. On the Tuesday following the murders, hundreds gathered for a candlelight vigil in a park near the school. Mael's teachers spoke of her bright smile and eagerness to learn. Miyoshi's friends shared stories of her kindness and resilience. As darkness fell, the glow of hundreds of candles illuminated tear-streaked faces, a community united in mourning and in questions about how such violence could have been prevented. Meanwhile, a GoFundMe campaign launched by family members sought to raise funds to return Mioshi and Mael's bodies to Seattle for burial. The campaign page contained a pointed message. Addressing mental health issues is imperative to the growth of our communities. We have to address concerns before it becomes too late, such as this case. She was all smiles, even when things got hard. Shwanda Taylor's voice breaks as she describes her sister Mioshi. She was very talented and very loved. She was always looking out for others and loved her children with all of her heart. The raw grief in Taylor's words echoes throughout the Berkeley community. Miyoshi's niece adds another layer to the family's loss. She loved her family. She loved hard. She was all about family. The exclamation points in her written statement capture the intensity of Miyoshi's devotion and the magnitude of what was stolen from them. At Berkeley Elementary School, just walking distance from the crime scene, Mael's absence leaves a void impossible to fill. Her desk sits empty, adorned with messages from classmates who struggle to understand why their friend won't return. The Ferguson-Florissant School District confirms Mael was their student, and counselors work with children processing their first encounter with violent death. Online, the family's GoFundMe page displays photos of Mioshi and Mael smiling together, images of happiness that sharpen the contrast with their tragic end. The campaign's goal is practical, to bring their bodies back to Seattle for burial, but its message cuts deeper. Addressing mental health issues is imperative to the growth of our communities. We have to address concerns before it becomes too late, such as this case. Throughout Berkeley, signs of a community in mourning appear. Black ribbons tie to mailboxes. Church marquees display messages of support for the family. The local grocery store where Mioshi shopped creates a donation jar at the register, quickly filling with bills and coins. Small offerings from neighbors who wish they could have done more. In North St. Louis County, the nonprofit JDASA, Justice Against Domestic and Sexual Abuse, responds with action. The organization's founder, Dr. Cynthia Bennett, speaks from experience as a survivor herself.
The North St. Louis County nonprofit JDASA aims to curb domestic and sexual abuse.
This is something we're seeing too much of.
One of their targeted areas is Berkeley. That's why this double homicide hits home. As a survivor, the nonprofit's founder, Dr. Cynthia Bennett, wants to empower.
Because it's their child. You know, it's kind of hard for them to really want to say, my child is abusing me, but it happens often. And so we want them to know abuse is abuse.
According to court documents, 1 week prior to all of this, McCloud went to the Berkeley Police Department and reported her son was making threats to her and her granddaughter. That's why Dr. Bennett wants to partner with police and send a reminder of the valuable resources.
And we will do everything we can to assist so we can not have another one of these situations.
The suspect had his initial court appearance today and will remain there without bond until a hearing next week. There is a GoFundMe set up to transfer the victims back to Seattle. If you'd like to help, you can head to our website, case2k.com, and go to the section as seen on TV.
This is something we are seeing too much of, Bennett states firmly. Because it's their child, it's hard for them to say, my child is abusing me. But it happens often. And abuse is abuse. JDASA specifically targets Berkeley in their work, making this case particularly significant to their mission. In response, they organize community workshops on recognizing family violence and establish a support group specifically for parents experiencing abuse from adult children, a hidden form of domestic violence often overlooked in prevention efforts. As Berkeley mourns, the community confronts uncomfortable questions about what they missed and what they might have done differently. Questions that haunt them as they pass the house on Redford Drive, now standing empty behind police tape. 1 week before the murders, Mioshi McCloud walked into the Berkeley Police Department. She reported her son was making threats against her and her granddaughter. This critical moment, a mother seeking protection, marked the beginning of a countdown to tragedy. The police report, filed and processed, entered the system. No officers conducted a follow-up visit. No protective order was issued. No intervention occurred. 7 days passed between Mioshi's cry for help and her death. This represents a catastrophic breakdown in threat assessment protocols, explains former FBI profiler Dr. James Garrison. When someone reports threats from a cohabitating family member, immediate intervention is essential. The proximity creates constant danger. The timeline reveals a series of missed opportunities. Day 1, Mioshi files police report about threats. Days 2 to 6, no documented follow-up from law enforcement. Day 7, double homicide. This pattern of inaction reflects broader systemic issues in how domestic violence threats are prioritized. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. Many threats go unreported, and those that are reported often receive inadequate response. Parent abuse by adult children represents one of the most under-recognized forms of family violence, Dr. Cynthia Bennett of JDASA explains. Her organization has documented a 27% increase in cases of adult children abusing parents in the St. Louis area over the past 5 years. The statistics are alarming, Bennett continues. Approximately 1 in 10 aging parents experiences some form of abuse from adult children. yet they report at lower rates than other domestic violence victims. The shame is overwhelming. This shame creates a dangerous silence. Parents, especially mothers, often minimize threats from their children, hoping the behavior will improve. This hesitation can be fatal. When Mioshi overcame this barrier and reported her son, the system still failed her. Warning signs were present beyond Miyoshi's police report. Okane's history of threatening behavior toward family members. 2. The recent change in living situation. Okane moving in with his mother and niece. 3. Miyoshi's explicit statement to police that she felt unsafe in her home. 4. Neighbors noting arguments and concerning behavior in the days before the murders. 5. Mael's apparent fear of her uncle, observed by her friend. Each sign represented a potential intervention point. Each was either missed or dismissed. The GoFundMe page created after the murders addresses this directly. Addressing mental health issues is imperative to the growth of our communities. We have to address concerns before it becomes too late, such as this case. This statement highlights another system failure: mental health intervention. While Okane's specific mental health history remains private, experts note that accessible mental health services can prevent violence. Early intervention in cases of threatening behavior can literally save lives, explains Dr. Elaine Westbrook, Director of Crisis Prevention Services. When someone makes explicit threats, this often indicates they're experiencing a mental health crisis. Immediate assessment should be mandatory, not optional. The Berkeley Police Department, following the murders, announced a review of their threat assessment protocols. The failure was acknowledged. We are examining our response procedures to ensure threats between family members receive appropriate priority. This tragedy has exposed gaps in our system that must be addressed. For families currently experiencing similar situations, resources exist that Mioshi may not have known about. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 24/7 Crisis Support. Adult Protective Services specifically handles elder abuse cases. JID Asset, local support for domestic and sexual abuse victims. Crisis Response Units, mental health professionals who can respond alongside police. Emergency protective orders can be obtained within hours in high-risk situations. These resources represent lifelines that might have altered the outcome for Mioshi and Mael. The tragedy on Redford Drive exposes not just individual failures, but systemic weaknesses in how communities protect vulnerable members. The most heartbreaking aspect of this case, Dr. Bennett notes, is that Mioshi did everything right. She recognized the danger, she reported it, she sought help through official channels, and still, the system failed her. This failure extends beyond police response to broader social issues. How seriously we take threats between family members, how we support parents abused by adult children, and how we intervene when warning signs appear. The Berkeley community now faces difficult questions. How many other Miyoshis have reported threats and received inadequate response? How many families are living with similar dangers, unseen and unprotected? And most importantly, what changes must occur to prevent the next tragedy? As one neighbor put it, the police station is right behind their house. If they couldn't be saved, who can? Sometimes the greatest danger lies within our own homes, behind the faces we think we know best. Mioshi McCloud's story forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth. A mother who opened her door to her son, a grandmother who sought protection through proper channels, a woman whose final act was trying to protect her granddaughter. Her life, and Miel's, ended just steps away from the police station that should have been their sanctuary. The timeline of this tragedy reveals a brutal truth. 7 days separated Miyoshi's plea for help and her murder. 7 days during which intervention was possible. 7 days that might have changed everything. The warning signs were clear. Explicit threats reported to police. A history of concerning behavior. A mother who stated she felt unsafe, a child who showed fear of her uncle. Each represented a crossroads where different decisions might have led to different outcomes. For families currently facing similar dangers, immediate action can be life-saving. If you're experiencing threats from a family member, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7 233. Request an emergency protective order through local courts. Create a safety plan with trusted friends or family. Document all threats and concerning behavior. Consider temporary relocation to a safe location. If someone you know is being threatened, take their fears seriously, especially regarding family members. Help them connect with professional resources. Check in regularly using safe communication methods. Report concerns to authorities if immediate danger exists. The Berkeley community honors Mioshi and Mael not just through memorials and vigils, but through commitment to change. The Ferguson-Florissant School District has implemented new protocols for identifying at-risk students. The Berkeley Police Department has revised its threat assessment procedures. JADASA has expanded its outreach programs specifically addressing parent-child abuse. These changes matter, but they cannot bring back a talented, loving mother or a bright-eyed 11-year-old with her whole life ahead of her. Their story reminds us that domestic violence doesn't always look like we expect. It can be a son threatening his mother. It can hide behind family loyalty and parental love. It can escalate from threats to murder in the space of a week. What do you think communities can do to better protect families from violence within the home? Have you ever witnessed warning signs that were ignored? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might help someone recognize danger before it's too late. If this story impacted you, please like and share to spread awareness. The more we understand about family violence, the more lives we might save. This has been Shadows of Crime. I'm your host, and I'll be back soon with another case that challenges how we think about justice, safety, and the shadows that sometimes fall across the places we should feel safest. If you're new here, subscribe now. These stories matter, and the lessons they teach might one day save a life.